Right though, Scott. Let's move on to the pupil, as it were, with Super 8.
Yes, in Super 8, where Joel Courtney's Joe Lamb is a 14-year-old trying to get past the accidental death of his mother in their small Ohioan 1979 town, with his father, Kyle Chandler's deputy Jackson Lamb, not being a great deal of help, at least emotionally speaking. Joel's helping his best friend, Riley Griffiths' Charles, film for a local film festival, alongside his other friends, including Ellie Fanning's Alice, whom Joe's expressly forbidden from consorting with, his father blaming her father for the aforementioned accident. Such family drama goes mostly out of the window when the kids, filming one night on a borrowed Super 8 camera, witness a catastrophic train crash caused by their biology teacher. Why would he do such a thing? And what's the deal with these weird otherworldly metal cubes the train was carrying? As you've perhaps figured out by context, the train was transporting a now on-the-loose alien life form along with components of the ship that it arrived in, and he's trying to get home while the Air Force roll into town to recapture him, locking down the town under a veil of secrecy. Of course, it will take a bit of digging and discovery and a whole lot of adventure for the kids and the deputy to figure all this out. Now, we've probably got a lot to say about J.J. Abrams, but to be clear, Super 8 is a film not without its flaws, and given that talking about them is sort of the point of this podcast, we'll get to them. But for me, at least, I think one overarching thing I'd like to say about Super 8 before any of that is that this is a great deal of fun. It's a very good blockbuster-type film with a bunch of great character touches, particularly in the supporting cast, and perhaps it's table stakes these days, but there's some really nice CG action set pieces. However, if you want to nitpick it, you absolutely can, as to be fair, you can with most of the softer science fiction out there. Hell, E.T. has levitation and mystical healing in it, so in that context, powers of electromagnetism aren't all that far out there. A more interesting nitpick is the tone of the alien encounters, which has to rather awkwardly turn on a dime from being one step away from the xenomorphs of aliens, an evil it-esque spider that appears to be eating people, to a highly advanced empathetic alien by the end of it. I mean, it's sort of explained away in the text of it, but that logic never really gets matched to the emotion or the actions of it. But what Abrams handles better, and is probably the genesis of the new Spielberg nonsense, was the emotions and relationships between the youngsters, which has deliberate echoes, some might say outright lifting, not just from E.T. but from the likes of the Goonies, which has worked very well with a mostly, fanning aside, untested cast. Again, it's not perfect. The kid obsessed with blowing stuff up's character arc is that he likes to blow things up, which is rather less parabolic an arc than you might hope for, but it's entirely adequate for a minor supporting character, and both he and the rest of the crew make for a fun Scooby gang. Of course, calling Abrams the new Spielberg was always a bit silly when the old Spielberg was still around making mostly great films, but hindsight is 2020 and we didn't know what Star Wars flavoured horrors awaited us. On a track record, however, of this, his first Star Trek reboot, and perhaps a selected reading of his other earlier writing and production credits, I can kind of see where the thinking was and wouldn't have perhaps entirely disagreed with it at that point. Now, at any rate, Super 8 is, for my money, a very entertaining film and very much not The Rise of Skywalker, so that's nice. I award it Super 8 out of Super 10.
I suppose the good thing about The Rise of Skywalker is that many, many things aren't The Rise of Skywalker, so yes. We should really count our blessings.
Yes.
This is the second time I've seen Super 8, and it's fine. I actually, I was enjoying it more, maybe the first half. Mm-hmm. The second half of the film, though, you know, in this ostensibly child-friendly film that clearly is riffing off of things like The Goonies and Stand By Me is another one that's been mentioned. Mm-hmm. Been talking about this film a lot, and E.T. It then has a member of the United States military murdering a man by putting a poisonous injection in his blood. Yeah. And then the film, 5 minutes before the apparent happy E.T.-like ending, the monster is observed to be eating a human.
Yeah. It's like
gnawing an arm like a drumstick.
It's like for a while it forgets that it's a kid's film and turns into something more like Independence Day just because they could. It's got some weird tonal shifts in it that I'm not entirely... It's certainly much less family-friendly a film than E.T. is. Still, I think, a decent adventure, but again, I'm probably coming at this from someone who watched this as an adult already. Yes. But certainly this is not something you could watch, you could put in front of a 6-year-old the way you could with E.T. Very different kettles of fish in that regard.
Yeah. It's rated a 12A. And I even question that, because that's particularly because anybody under 12 can go and see that with an adult. Because, again, man murdered by authority figure.
Yes.
Injured man in hospital setting murdered by authority figure. Like, yes. That's not very child friendly. And it's not ambiguous. Murdered.
Yes.
And then, as I mentioned, before the apparently heroic ending or the happy ending, eating a human. Eating a human actually seen. I mean, partially obscured, but seen eating a human, not just mentioned, you know. This is strange tonally. And I think that's my biggest problem with it, is that the tone is all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's not particularly cohesive. So there are bits of it I like, and I like for the most part the child cast, and I think that's its biggest strength in comparison to Stand By Me and E.T., and obviously not The Goonies, because The Goonies is appalling. It's a terrible film, and in this film, everybody's not shouting all the time, so it's an instant win over The Goonies. But it's the fact that the child cast, they're really good. They feel quite natural. It's particularly the main kid, Joel Courtney. But then, there's a subplot where Kyle Chandler's breaking out of prison and going to rescue the kids, but the kids rescued themselves, and that was all kind of pointless. You could just cut that plot out entirely then. It feels like there's a lot of influences in there, and J.J. Abrams didn't know which film to make.
Yeah.
He wrote this, and I've thought before that J.J. Abrams, he's a really very fine action director.
Yeah, but can't write for peanuts.
Yeah, that's it. That's one of the big problems of Rise of Skywalker, which he wrote, and it's appalling.
Yeah.
It's genuinely awful. In terms of, he can do action really well, but he just can't do story, and I think that's the problem. Because there were some really nice visual touches in this film. There's the scene when they get their processed film back from the start, when the kids are looking at the film they made of the night of the train crash, and you see just kind of slightly out of focus in the back of the shot is the creature escaping, kind of almost like a big spider, like you mentioned, Scott, looking very like a kind of 1950s monster movie. That's a really nice touch. And then there's shots where you just start to see the creature too. The first time you see it is in the reflection of a pool of petrol. Mm-hmm. And then after that you start just seeing it too much, hasn't he learned anything? You don't show the creature that much. I'm not really interested in design.
Yes. And aren't you the Cloverfield guy?
Yes, and is exactly where it's going, Scott. His protestations that this wasn't actually in the Cloverfield universe are not helped by the creature design.
Yes.
Also, a creature apparently motion captured by Bruce Greenwood. Why?
Yes, why?
Why not just Bruce Greenwood, why motion captured by anybody?
Yes.
Because I know that the idea behind this is that it's actually like an amalgamation of two films. One was that it was wanted to do like a monster movie kind of film, and also wanted to do a film about making Super 8 films.
Yeah. And
neither one on its own was going to be enough, so he combined them. But it feels like he hasn't really thought of things through, and so that's even in other ways, to practical reasons, this film got on my wrong side almost from the very beginning with the train crash, because the train crash is ridiculous. It's so over the top. And I've read two things about what Abrams has said about it. One was that it was deliberately over the top to be an homage to action films from the 70s or something, or sci-fi films in the 70s. And the other thing was that the train crash sequence wasn't storyboarded at all. It's the second one I definitely believe.
Yeah.
Because it's so over the top. Apparently, once the train starts crashing, it gains momentum and kinetic energy somehow. But why particularly bothers? Because first of all, there's too much of that sort of stuff, too much explosion, too many explosions and that kind of thing. It goes on for so long, and it's just so loud and busy, and by the end of it, this is really dull now, get on with it.
Yeah.
But also, a crucial plot point at the beginning is that and definitely it's a call back to 1980s kids films, because I'm pretty sure it's the high school teacher from Gremlins that plays the high school teacher here that crashes into the train. He drives headlong into a train with apparently 1,000 miles per hour worth of kinetic energy, head first in his pickup truck, which bursts into flames immediately. But then apparently he is not burned and in fact alive to carry on the plot. It's it's so disjointed in that way. It's like, clearly he's more concerned about the action and is fitted in the story later because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And there are a few bits like that, so it just feels, again, so they're actually, it's an enjoyable film. It's not brilliant, but it's enjoyable. And there are really positive points in here, but I kind of just wish somebody else had written it.
Yeah.
And let him direct it, and maybe that would have worked out. But because what you'll notice is that Steven Spielberg hasn't written anything.
Yeah, not since AI, which I don't think anyone's holding up as the the peak of his career. So yeah.
Admittedly, I quite liked AI. Even if, like E.T., it's why does it have the initialism and the the abbreviation, the explanation rather. But yeah, basically Spielberg doesn't write anything because he knows where his strengths lie, and I think that's a big problem to James, is that he doesn't.
Yeah, he does seem to have bought into his own hype a bit too much, going from like what he went through in his kind of later career. He's clearly taken on more and more responsibilities in filmmaking, and I don't think he's got the chops for it. To be honest, I don't think he's shown that he's a good enough writer, really. I don't think at the end of the day, his scripts are good enough, and he's had a few impossible hands, to be fair. So say what we will about the Star Trek stuff, and we have at length in the past, but it's a bit of a poison chalice, really. You're never going to make anyone happy, but he did seem to go out of his way to make nobody happy with any of it. So his career since Super 8 has been, I would say, largely downhill. I don't think there's been too many bright spots. The second Star Trek film wasn't that great either, and since then he's been on the Star Wars train, which ended up much like the train in Super 8.
I think, see, as a producer, I think he's doing well because the Mission Impossible franchise is actually now one of the best, or possibly the best action franchise that there is.
Fair, yes.
So I think there must, and even things like Morning Glory, which I found out today, he was a producer on.
Yeah,
that kind of thing would be just be, you think, just be a kind of run of the mill rom-com. Actually, that's a really good film.
Yeah,
in a genre that I really don't particularly care for because they tend to be so samey, not particularly inventive, or maybe you might watch once, never again. Morning Glory stands out for being different in that genre in particular. He's a producer of it, so I think he really does have good ideas as a producer. He's maybe helping get things made. And the idea of the Cloverfield universe was good. I just don't think it's been executed on well because I've seen the Cloverfield Paradox.
Yeah.
I don't know whether maybe getting invited to do a TED Talk, when he gave that very famous TED Talk about the mystery box, that's maybe just gone straight to his head.
Yes.
And as you say, he's got bought into his own hype. Because really, if he should have learned anything from the guy he adores, Steven Spielberg, it's like, let other people do the writing.
Yeah.
Play to your strengths. It's clear now, and then you get to the culmination of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker that he wrote, produced, and directed, and it's the worst Star Wars film that there is. So,
yeah.
I mean, that was not a easy thing to achieve, and so it's almost impressive.
Yeah. I don't, in theory, hate the idea of his mystery box stuff, but I think the crucial thing he's missed is that even the mystery box can be a mystery, but it should have something inside it where clearly he never has anything inside that mystery box. It is just more mystery inside it. So as a result, nothing can have a satisfactory answer, and that's really plagued a lot of his work since then. But I suppose getting back to Super 8, it would be remiss not to mention that basically the same idea was done by Netflix for Stranger Things, give or take, and did it better, to be fair. There's a lot of moments in Super 8 where I was watching it thinking, this if it was a series would actually be quite a lot better. If you could have dragged out certainly the early, just getting to know the kids and their investigations, all that kind of stuff, that seemed like it was screaming out to be expanded into its own little mini-series rather than just rushing towards the ultimately disappointing action ending. A recommendation for Super 8 is to watch Stranger Things instead if you haven't. But I still think Super 8's okay. But yeah. Yeah,
it's okay. It's fine. I don't regret having watched it again. But Stranger Things, it's quite interesting you mentioned it, Scott, because I was very struck by similarities to Stranger Things, both E.T. and Super 8. E.T. at the beginning, there's a lot of similarities there, but obviously, right, that was Stranger Things was very much going for that aesthetic.
Yes,
there's a callback to those films in particular, and E.T. would have been a big touchstone for them. For the whatever the name brothers are. I've forgotten the name. Russo? No, that's not right.
The Farrelly brothers? Duffer brothers.
Duffer Brothers. Whereas at the start of Super 8, I'm really sort of stuff like how much it looked and felt like, slightly earlier than Stranger Things, but how much it looked and felt like Stranger Things. I'm thinking, yeah, Stranger Things did basically the same thing, particularly with the threat of like evil alien monsters, or in this Super 8's a bit mixed about whether they're actually evil or not. But yeah, felt very, very like it, but that did it better and didn't have as much governmental murder. It had like it was like, yes, a straight up monster that nobody was pretending was a good thing in Stranger Things. And the government's doing experiments and stuff, but it didn't feel quite as bold as that. And also, I don't think Stranger Things was quite pitched so much at children. It's got children in it, but that's... Yeah, anyway. It's fine. I just think J.J. Abrams, in trying to ape someone else, has like missed the things that they should have learned from them.
Yeah, that's a fair point, yeah.
It's like, this is the same man who wrote Armageddon, who decided, like, here's a smart script, let's have some of the most incredibly skilled and gifted people on the planet replaced by drillers for 2 days, because, you know... Not that Armageddon is entirely without merit. It's dumb, but it's fun dumb. Yes. So I'm trying to work my way to some sort of actual comparison or contrast here, and I'm just wittering now, so I'll stop.
I think what we've established is, controversially, J.J. Abrams isn't as good as Steven Spielberg. There, we've said it.
I think what's quite weird about J.J. Abrams, I know he was working in TV for quite a while, so whether that's maybe... But he's not actually done all that many films, certainly not as a director.
Yeah.
So the Star Trek films he did, I actually really enjoy, because they're good sci-fi action films. They're not Star Trek, was my problem with them. And again, I blame him and Alex Kurtzman in particular. But for Abrams to come into Star Wars, that seemed to fit, because that Star Wars is more about action than thinking.
Yes.
But what it turns out is that, Super 8 wasn't the first time he was just trying to ape famous 1970s directors with beards.
Yeah.
Because that's what he did with the Star Wars The Force Awakens. Like, I'll just make George Lucas's film again, but, less good.
Yeah.
Yes, and then let's assume and hope that 2019 is his last film ever, because honestly, he might consider getting worse than Rise of Skywalker a challenge. I don't want to see that.
Seems unlikely or impossible.
Yes, but I thought it was impossible to get worse than Revenge of the Sith or Attack of the Clones, and he managed it, so...
True.
Yeah, I think the last thing just to kind of reiterate, though, is like, how weird that Super 8 is the only film that he's done as a director that's his film. As much as it takes cues from lots of other things in the past, though, as everything else has been like a franchise film or something.
Yeah.
Which is quite weird. It's like, how you get enough of a reputation to like be asked to put your own stamp on a franchise when you haven't actually done anything but franchise films.
True.
Curious. Out with the scope of this particular episode, I guess, but I was struck by that looking again at his filmography today.
Yeah, we're perhaps being a little unfair by not even mentioning any of his TV work, where, to be fair, he probably did more in the realms of building up a reputation for that kind of thing. I don't rate Lost at all, but can't deny that it was very successful, and same to a degree with Alias and some other things. So it's not like it's coming completely out of left field that he couldn't be asked to take some of that success that he found in TV and bring that across to films as well.
Yeah.
Particularly given the episodic nature of that stuff as well. But still, certainly not as proven in the film industry as it was with TV at the time.
Yeah, and again, if you're listening to this, Mr. Abrams, which is of course incredibly likely, get someone else to do your writing for you.
Yeah.
Because then we might not have lines like, I've never had a teacher point a gun at me before, which is exactly the sort of line any human would ever say. Also, enough with the lens flares. They're not nice.